Hi, this is Sadia Humayun from Burfi Culture. How are British Muslims coping with the coronavirus and how are mosques responding to them? Are they planning to open up anytime soon? And what are their plans for Eid, which is just around the corner from now? So these are some of the questions I'd like to ask. I have with me Zainab Gulamali from the British Muslim Council. Hi, Zainab. Welcome.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Let's start off with what are the mosques saying to you about how to cope with the sort of current situation with the virus and
So when the pandemic broke out, we realised there was some unique characteristics within Muslim communities that put us at higher risk. Not just were most of us from ethnic minorities and had a higher rate of heart disease and diabetes, which put us at higher risk. Lots of us live in intergenerational households, which make social isolation and social distancing more difficult. But also the frequency of congregational activities in Muslim communities, with people going to the mosque to pray on a daily basis, or sometimes multiple times a day, or at least once a week, puts Muslim communities at a higher risk. And so before the lockdown was called, the MCB took the unprecedented step of consulting with mosques and calling for the suspension of all congregational activities within mosques. This was a week before the government announced a place of worship should close. And in that week, we had over 300 mosques close their doors, suspend all congregational activities to help keep communities safe. And now we look back, that was in the middle of March, and we look back and we think, we've seen so much, so we've seen our communities go through so much in that time, and it's now more than ever, it appears to be the right step that we took. And now that the Prime Minister started to loosen the restrictions around the social distancing measures and has announced that places of worship could open in July at the earliest, it's time for mosques to start thinking about how they can reopen in a safe way and what measures they need to put in place to make sure that mosques can reopen but communities are still kept safe. So over the last couple of weeks, we've been consulting mosques and madrasas and Muslim institutions and ordinary community members from every part of the UK, from every cultural background and from every sect, to understand what they think about mosques reopening, how they feel, and what they are planning on doing and what restrictions they are planning on putting in place to make sure that they are able to keep communities safe whilst reopening. And so from the mosques that we've spoken to, we understand that there's a desire to impose a number of restrictions, for example, not letting people who are over 65 in, or requiring people to wear face masks when they come into the mosque, or bring their own prayer mat and Quran, or keep a distance in prayers. But there's a lot of planning that needs to take place, and we also need some more clarity from the government about what they expect and what they deem to be a safe way to reopen places of worship, for places of worship to then be able to assess that within their own context and decide what they can do.
Mm-hmm. And what about for example, Eid, and which is, like I said, just around the corner? How are people, the community, taking that? What are your plans for that?
So there was a lot of anxiety around, there is a lot of anxiety around Eid, and there was a lot of anxiety ahead of Ramadan about what a Ramadan from home will look like. And, we are 2/3 of the way through Ramadan, and we have all managed to adapt to a Ramadan from home. We've all managed to see the blessing and the virtue in being at home and taking this Ramadan a bit more, at a slower pace. And so Eid will very much be in the same vein. We've seen some amazing work come out of mosques during Ramadan. For example, there are mosques who would usually hold iftars and feed their communities, who are now delivering that very food home to people so that they're still able to get the food from the mosque. We've seen mosques open up as food banks to help those who are needy during this time when community service and charity is so important. And we've seen mosques live stream their services, take all of their services digitally so that people can still connect with the spiritual aspect of Ramadan from their homes. And, you know, Eid with the mosques closed will be very much the same, you know. Some schools of thought believe that you can pray the Eid Salah, the Eid prayers, by yourself at home or in congregation with your household at home. So some people will be doing that. Some people may decide to celebrate in other ways in their households, but that would be very much what Eid is within our households.
Right. Okay. So what about, there was a report recently about a surge in burials and funerals. So how are the mosques coping with that?
So, you know, by virtue of ethnic minority communities being disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, that also means that large proportions of the Muslim community are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And we have seen a huge number of excess deaths in Muslim communities and a huge surge. You speak to some cemeteries and they tell you that they used to bury 5 people a week and they've gone to burying 50 people a week.
Yeah.
And of course, in Islam, there's the tradition of burying someone as soon as possible. There's no strict time frame. It doesn't need to be within 1 day or 2 days, but it's as soon as possible. And at the start of the pandemic, there was some difficulty around being able to do this because, you know, the councils and the hospitals and everyone was trying to adapt to this huge surge in death that we were seeing. And now it seems that there is a clear process in place. The process is being followed. And whilst there are a huge number of deaths and funerals taking place, things are a little bit more streamlined and things are able to run a bit more smoothly. And when the funerals do take place, they have to be socially distanced funerals. There is a very limited number of people who are able to attend. So some cemeteries and some local councils will say no more than 6 or 10 people, or, you know, immediate family only, and only those who aren't self-isolating. And so Muslim funerals are looking very, very different. Traditionally, they're held at the mosque. They are, you know, an open house. Everyone who's able to attends, and you pray the funeral prayers inside the mosque with your community. And now that's not able to take place, and the funeral prayers are being prayed at the cemetery itself with a very small number of people, you know, keeping 2 meters apart. But something that we have seen come out of this is that a trend in funerals being live streamed or being shown on Zoom instead, so that the family members who aren't able to attend or the loved ones who aren't able to attend are still able to take part and feel close to it. And I think that is something we've not ever really had before, but it's actually shown that we can really be connected at such a difficult time. And, you know, I have friends whose parents have sadly died, and they've been able to live stream their parents' funeral so that family members who are elsewhere in the world who wouldn't be able to attend even if there wasn't a pandemic are still able to tune in. So in a strange way, it is also helping to bring families closer together.
Yeah. I mean, there are ways that, you know, you're working around it basically under the circumstances, and the same would apply to the religious wedding, the nikah.
I don't know actually. I don't believe there are weddings taking place, you know, there aren't in the traditional sense in places of worship. And again, you know, it's up to individuals and families if they wish to hold a nikah, you know, via video conferencing facility. But, you know, in the planning of reopening mosques, that a lot of consideration also needs to be given to whether funerals can take place again or take place in a modified way, and the same for weddings. So there's a lot of preparation and considerations that Muslim communities need to give.
So basically, the MCD is waiting till the government makes the announcement in July as to how to proceed further.
Yes, so currently we're working with mosques to understand what they think they would need to do and to be able to provide guidance. We're working really closely with the British Islamic Medical Association, which is a professional body of Muslim medics and healthcare workers, to explain to mosques how they can take necessary precautions, how they can remain safe, and what measures they can put in place to keep their communities safe. So we're consulting mosques, we're discussing with medical experts, and we will be producing guidance for mosques to show them how they can reopen in a safe way that will be in accordance with public health advice and medical advice. But it all depends on the government's guidelines and the government's timeline and when they wish to reopen the places of worship.
And lastly, how challenging is it? Because, you know, as you said, the Muslim from different sects, from different backgrounds, mosques have different sort of rules and regulations. So how difficult is it to streamline into, you know, one voice?
I think the pandemic has shown, not just in terms of Muslim communities, but wider British communities, that we have a lot more in common, and that we are, you know, it is incredibly important that we all work together, we work collaboratively to keep all of our communities safe, be that Muslim communities or our wider communities. But, you know, there is a real sense that we are all in this together. And I think, you know, everyone understands the gravity of the situation we're in. We all know someone who's passed away from coronavirus, or we know someone who's had one of their loved ones pass away from coronavirus. We see the figures in the news every day, you know, on the front pages of the papers. We all know that there is a responsibility incumbent upon all of us to preserve life, and that trumps everything and trumps all differences. And I think that's really important to remember that, and to sort of harness that energy to work together, to work collaboratively, to reopen our places of worship when it's safe to do so, to get our lives back to normal when it's safe to do so, but to do that in a way that continues to help save lives and protect people and keep our communities safe.
The community is by and large being cooperative.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we, you know, I think one thing that's incredible to see is all of the brilliant initiatives that have come out of the community. So within the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, we found over 100 volunteer initiatives had been set up by mosques or Muslim individuals in different communities to help those who are needy, to deliver food to those who are self-isolating, to drop medicines around to people who needed it. You know, we've seen incredible work being done by mosques to take their services digitally to still reach out to their communities. We've seen a bunch of Muslim mental health organizations come together to set up a consortium to be able to deliver the widest range of services to everyone who is in need. This pandemic has just really shown the power of a community and the power of working together. And I think that's something that I think will stay with all of us for a really long time, and is something to really remember when we look back at this time. And, you know, we look back at all of the sadness that has been, you know, that has been in this time, but we can also see all of the blessings, all of the lovely work that's been done, and all of the community spirit that I think has really helped everyone to keep going.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. And on that positive note, I'd like to thank you for coming here and answering our question. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.